Most people see fitness as a sprint, trying to get from start to finish as quickly as possible, but many goals require years of work. Long-term progress needs a more flexible approach that focuses on continually starting, regardless of your situation. It's simple when you have the hours to commit to developing skills, strength, and flexibility, but today I want to share with you 4 tactics to make the most out of the least amount of training when maybe your motivation is lacking or it's not your biggest priority. Priorities is actually a good place to start because rather than answering the question of how do we combine these things together, which I'm going to get to shortly, we need to say, do we actually need to? Oftentimes there's a little bit of FOMO. Maybe you feel like you need to be working on juggling all these different elements, whereas in reality, actually, maybe you only have one goal. When you consider that it takes roughly 1/6 of the effort to maintain something as it does to attain it, you would probably be better off putting all of the time and energy that you have into achieving that main thing. Then once it's ticked off and done, you can do a little bit to keep it there and then focus your energy on the other aspects. So let's use 2 example programs of one that's prioritized and one that's not. Your session A is going to be an even split. We're going to be covering all bases, working most muscle groups and training a mixture of strength and flexibility. If, for example, we only care about improving our strength instead of doing an even split, we move to something that's like a 60-40, a 70-30, an 80-20. We still have some time on the other aspects, so we're not going to lose any progress there. They're going to maintain, but allows us to concentrate our progress towards those key factors. We should also prioritize compound movements. This applies for stretching and flexibility drills as well. Including multiple joints and muscles into a single exercise is a simple way to maximize the amount of work done. Accessory exercises are great when you have more time, but you will see better results adding more sets to compound movements. And this leaves us with our basic training structure. How do we try to fit the most amount of training into the least amount of time? There's 2 different ways to do this, specifically looking at combining strength and flexibility. Number 1 would be with supersets. Say we've got our normal strength session, we would simply add an unrelated stretch or flexibility exercise in as our rest period. Ultimately, when you're training, you spend probably half your time resting, so there's no reason why we can't max out that time. But the key is that the exercise needs to be unrelated. If we're training upper body, then maybe stick to lower body stretches. If we're doing lower body training, stick to upper body stretches. Ultimately, you're going to be training your goals, your priorities with your strength training, so then just train your goals and priorities with your flexibility training in the rest periods. It's just the squeezing the time together and not making it into a long drawn out process, but they can actually complement each other as well. If we're training pressed handstands, we're going to be wanting to stretch our pancake or our hamstring flexibility in between because it complements each other. Likewise, if we're trying to improve our overhead flexibilities, a trap 3 raise, we could stretch our lats in between, and that's also going to help increase the effectiveness of the exercise. The second option here is just to skip the separation completely and understand that if we want to develop flexibility, it can look very much like strength training. For example, we could do Romanian deadlifts to improve our hamstring flexibility and also strengthen them and strengthen our lower back. We can perform chest flies to open up our pecs and shoulders, but also build some muscle in them. Split squats for building leg strength, ankle flexibility, opening up the hips. Really, the options here are relatively endless. Pick the ones that are relevant to you and chuck them into your training. You're going to get both strength and flexibility in one exercise. That's about as time efficient as you're going to get. Something else you don't want to be wasting your time with is building a website from scratch, and that's why today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. Create a professionally designed layout tailored to your brand or business, optimized for every device, which is absolutely essential. You can create an online store with a couple of clicks, whether you sell physical goods, digital content, or services. It's how I started my business 7 years ago. With end-to-end analytics tracking, you can learn what works and how to grow your brand faster. You can go to squarespace.com to start your free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you can use this link to get yourself 10% off your first website or domain. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Point number 3 of 4 is don't underestimate the effectiveness and value of daily training. It is unbelievably effective when you think in the medium to long term. When I look back on the biggest achievements that I've made over the past 10 years, most of them started from a daily habit. Whether that was flexibility, I couldn't touch my toes, so I started stretching my hamstrings every single day. It was the best that I could do at the time, and ultimately doing something is much better than doing nothing. The same is true for handstands. Handstands works incredibly well on a daily basis because it is a skill. It benefits from that high frequency, high repetition of just attempting to do it. Both of these I actually covered in an entire video that you can find out right here. And in that video is a few recommendations to help you cultivate your own daily routine to work on the goals and the things that you have. It's a great way of complementing your main training without adding more time in the gym. You can just do this whenever. And that brings me nicely to point 4, which is ultimately my favorite aspect of flexibility, bodyweight training, handstands, is that it requires basically no equipment and you can do it anywhere. I'd say 90% of the time that I train outside. That enables me to take Molly, wherever she is. She needs to go for a walk. So usually I'll bring some rings with me, means I can get a nice upper body session in. I could maybe go for a run for part of that walk. It means I can get some cardiovascular training in. I can do some handstands and maybe stop somewhere for a little bit. I can do some stretching. Like, it's amazing how much time you can accumulate over the period of a week by just dotting in bits and pieces here and there, which bring that total volume up. And it takes some of that pressure away from maybe those 1 or 2 times a week that you can actually get to the gym and do some really focused training, because you have that base level of just work on the things that matter, the things that you want to improve. It's just there, it's built in. Again, if you want some examples, Coach Molly actually inspired an entire video, which I'll link here. That's got an example routine on it. If you want to combine cardio, flexibility, strength, everything kind of into one. Links to everything is in the description down below. As always, I'll catch you in the next one. Have a strong week. Peace.